Okay, welcome back to the show, everybody. I am your host, Craig Pastor Jardula, and joining me now on this historic day, you know her pretty well. She's been a friend of the shows. I've been in events with her. Spoke at the first Rage Against the War Machine. I also spoke with her at an Occupy Peace movement in New York last year as well, and I've gone to a lot of her events. I've heard her speak before. I love the way her mentality when it comes to foreign policy, and I think she's such a great guest. Her name is Diane Sare. She's the independent candidate for the U.S. Senate. She's running against Kirsten Gillibrand, and she once ran against Chuck Schumer out there, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, Diane Sare. How are you doing today, Diane?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me. It's always fun to be with you and talk to you.
So you're running against Kirsten Gillibrand this time for state senate, for the Senate, I should say, the National Senate, not just the state. But you also ran against Chuck Schumer. How does your policy on Israel differ from the two of them?
Well, I think that our relationship with Israel is just as important as our relationship should be with every single other nation on the planet, no more and no less. That is definitely not their view, although I have to say I agreed with Schumer when he made some comments a few months ago that Bibi Netanyahu was turning Israel into a pariah state. And I don't know if you saw what happened when Netanyahu spoke in the Congress, but he refused to shake Schumer's hand, although he practically kissed Gillibrand, who's been to Israel many times since the events of October 7th. So, there's a lot of controversy now because Israel is committing crimes against humanity, is committing genocide. People are looking back to the Nakba of 1948, rethinking things. My view is that we actually have to start with the last internationally recognized UN agreement, UN Resolution 242, which is the 67 borders, although I don't know if we'll get to that point. I mean, I don't know if that will be the end of it. I think that has to be the starting point because that was the last thing internationally recognized. And I think that the Biden administration is completely worse than hypocritical, because how can you say that you support a two-state solution and then when the time comes to recognize a Palestinian state, you don't recognize a Palestinian state? If you don't recognize a Palestinian state, then you are not for a two-state solution, and you should stop saying that.
So there's a lot to unpack there. I want to start with Bibi Netanyahu. My urges tell me to go right after Chuck Schumer, but let's sidebar him for just 1 second, because you did say some things out there, and it's very interesting the way Chuck Schumer is being painted right now by Donald Trump as a Hamas supporter almost. But that's laughable on his face. But let's start with Bibi. I hear a lot of people kind of blame Bibi as the reason for this problem. However, even Chuck Schumer, I think what he's doing right now, I think that's a way of him sitting on the fence, half weighing it, right? Because he doesn't necessarily, he can still say, I support Israel, I just don't support Netanyahu, and act like Netanyahu is a bad seed. But this has been going on since the late 40s. The Nakba took place in the 1940s. Isn't it unfair to just put it all on Netanyahu? Because regardless who has been the Israeli prime minister, whether it be, Rabin, Perez, anybody before them, right? They have always suppressed the Palestinians and really never talked seriously about a two-state solution. Isn't Israel the problem itself, not just Netanyahu, the Zionist ideology?
Well, I would say the problem is actually the British Empire, the creators of Zionism, which really had nothing to do with Judaism, and the United States, because everyone knows that, as Reagan did with Menachem Begin, the president could make a phone call and tell him, cut it out, or we're cutting you off from all aid, and the slaughter would cease within 5 or 10 minutes. We haven't done that. So I think and Netanyahu, he's sort of a hand grenade that's kept in reserve to make a wider war, which is where this thing is headed right now. and no one is reining him in on that question either. I heard on a call yesterday from a person from the region that the death toll in Lebanon is already over 10,000, and 2 million people are displaced. So, and then fools over here say Tony Blinken is sending $157 million in humanitarian aid to Lebanon and only 2 million to North Carolina. Well, maybe we shouldn't have helped Israel obliterate Lebanon. Maybe we shouldn't have bombed them, and then we wouldn't have to send $170 million to quote unquote relief, and we could do something for people here. So contrary to many Americans who have the line, oh, well, we're doing so much to help people overseas, or we're helping these people and that people. No, we have a pretty even-handed policy. It's an equal opportunity killing people. We're killing people overseas and we're killing people here.
Not just Chuck Schumer, but other congressional members have dual citizenship. There are people out there who saying when you're yelling for a ceasefire, I mean, obviously you want a humane halting right away of the bombing that's taking place on a regular basis. I mean, you showed a picture the other day on your show when we started off about when you're talking about Lebanon, and they've been doing this in Gaza for quite some time now, almost a year, right?
Right.
Whether they take out 6 apartment buildings for just one guy they were going after. I mean, 1,000 people in one shot right there.
Right. Right.
It's part of their laws, like the I believe it's called the Hadaya, the Nadaya, or the one of the Hadaya doctrine, which says that, it says, and I can pull it up, but what I'm trying to say is that it's within Israel's law to do what they're doing, to go after people. We've been hearing for almost a year right now. Well, Hamas is hiding behind these people. They're using them as human shields, but they still seem to justify it because of their laws. What is your thought process on that as we see a year take place where they have no care for life, and then we see Iran responding to the terrorist attacks from Israel, and they hit military bases?
Right. Right. No, look, I think we urgently need a Westphalian approach, because I don't want to downplay the trauma that people experienced on October 7th. People died. How exactly they died, who exactly killed them, I think we don't know the whole story. As we know, the Israelis have this, what is it called, Hannibal policy, that it's better for people to die than to be taken hostage. So there's certainly reason to believe that the IDF killed a lot of the people who died on October 7th. Nonetheless, they died. And somehow mankind is going to have to get above this idea of retribution, or worse than retribution. And I do think there's a reckoning coming for all those people who will not call what Israel did, or what Netanyahu, what was done, quote unquote, in response. It wasn't in response. That's been their policy, as you're saying, and you see it. The genocide, there is going to come a time, just as the Germans had to reckon with what they did to the Jews and the Gypsies in Nazi Germany, where people were silent, or they worse, tried to silence others who were speaking about the horrific loss of life. I think the Congress is unbelievably despicable right now. We have a show, or a Zoom meeting on Monday evenings, myself and Jose Vega, with various people, and we had Dr. Mark Perlman on, whom you're probably familiar with, who is a medical doctor. I think he's the head of some international surgeons group, and he went to Gaza for a month. And he said that what I saw there is worse than the 40 other disasters I have been to, including 9/11, Katrina combined. And then he and 99 doctors, nurses, medical professionals wrote a letter, including photographs and documentation of what they witnessed, of children having been shot twice clearly by snipers, of the targeting and torture of medical personnel, And they sent this to every member of Congress and demanded to meet. And not one congressman would meet with them except Tammy Duckworth, who's on the wrong side, but because one of the doctors in the delegation happened to be the one who saved her life when she was shot down in a helicopter crash and presided over the amputation of her legs and saved her life, she met with that one doctor, but she would not receive the delegation, and she hasn't changed her position on this. And that, I think, is beyond anyone who points at Nazi Germany and says, oh, how could that have ever happened? I agree with Aaron Bushnell. You're doing it now. We're in it now, if you are silent on this.
By the way, what I was talking about was the Dahaya doctrine, kind of play into what that doctor had said and what he had witnessed. It is an Israeli military strategy involving the large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure or domicile to pressure hostile governments. The doctrine was outlined by former IDF, our favorite, most, what are they called? The most compassionate,
yeah,
humane police, whatever, on the army on the face of the earth. Sure. They let you know they do knocking. Chief of General Staff Gadi Eisenhower. Israel Colonel Gabi Saboni wrote that Israel should target economic interest and centers of civilian power that support the organization. So, I mean, and of course, the history, the Lebanon war, and here they are at it again, as you were pointing out the other day, that, you know, they just leveled a couple apartment buildings to get one person. Just ridiculous at this point. And it's part of their policy. What I was getting to before, which I never really got to because I got sidetracked, was the fact that, okay, ceasefire is one thing, but isn't the bigger issue right now the fact that our Congress is just bought off by AIPAC and Israel? I mean, all our congressional, not all of them, but a decent amount of them, Diane, have dual citizenship between the United States and Israel. I mean, does anybody have dual citizenship between the United States and Russia? Because I'd like to see how that play out.
Right. I think it should be illegal to have dual citizenship with any country if you're in the Congress or in the U.S. military. Because how can you possibly serve the interests of our nation should a conflict arise with that nation? Then you should resign or step down. You know, forget it. I think that's absolutely should be unconstitutional.
So the other day I was speaking with another political analyst. Obviously, you're running for Congress, but like I said, you have that journalist gene, and you always go out and seek out the truth. But we were talking about what's going to become of the Gazans, the people in Gaza. And in fact, this particular analyst felt that it's going to get worse because now a broader conflict, which has now come to the doorstep, Iran, responding back, bombing in the ground invasion in Lebanon. Now they can actually, the bigger conflict is going to be paid way more attention to what's going on in Gaza. So I said, is there any way we can save the Gazan people right now? Obviously, all the president has to do is pick up the phone and say, no more, we're cutting off the funding and stopping this right now and figure something out. But, both Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, Kamala Harris says that they'll get whatever they want. They'll get the right to defend themselves, meaning a blank check. Joe Biden has given them so much money. Donald Trump has pretty much been trying to be the most Zionist president on the face of the earth right now. If Kamala's the president, there won't even be an Israel over there. They need to hurry up and finish up. I don't know what that means. Is that wink, wink code for nukes? But when you talk about the people of Gaza, and if they are completely forgotten, because even everything we see every day, Diane, it's like almost becoming the normal. It's becoming normal to see what's going on in Gaza every single day. It's going to be a year, right? And nobody seems to care. Do you think that the only way the people of Palestine could survive is to be nomadic? Because it doesn't look like the Israeli government, along with the West, is going to allow them to exist where they're at right now.
No, I think that what the British imperialist billionaire club is very worried about, even more than the election, is the BRICS summit happening in Kazan. And I will tell you that I don't agree. Some people said, well, Hamas had to launch the attack on October 7th because they realized they would never get a state if Israel and Saudi Arabia and, cut this deal. I'm not sure that's true, because what it doesn't look at, and this is where the freak out is really occurring, is that we're not the center of power anymore in the world. We think we are. This is very hard for Americans to digest. We are perhaps the most destructive power in the world. But in terms of power, who wants to work with the United States? Who wants to be our ally? Be our ally, and you know what? We'll kick you in the balls, poke out your eyes, and then leave you to starve to death.
Yeah.
That is not power. And again, there is really a principle of natural law which does assert itself. Now, it's possible we may all end up dead because people are going to push this to a nuclear war. And I do have to single out the completely idiotic comments of Trump saying, yeah, we should strike Iran and wipe out their nuclear facilities first. I don't know what the heck he is thinking of. Really, really bad. So we may all destroy ourselves, but this kind of evil will not prevail. And if the United States were to come to its senses, which I don't know what that will take, but if you look at what China and Russia are capable of doing together, I think that you could get a Palestinian state. I think we have to fight for massive, not just reconstruction, but a total renaissance in this region. And again, it's this Treaty of Westphalia question. When will people get to the point, as they did, because 100 years of religious war is hideous. If you look at paintings from the 1650s, the Treaty of Westphalia was 1648. You look at paintings from that period, everyone in them has got missing an arm, missing a leg. I mean, it was brutal, really brutal. And it took them 4 years to negotiate, but the warring parties finally said, you know what? If we continue this way, there is nothing else. It will just be the end. Our children will know nothing but war. We have to stop. And the agreement involved a lot of debt forgiveness. It involved literally drawing a line and saying, we are not looking back. There will be no retribution for any crimes committed, and we are henceforth going to act in the interest of the other. And it happened. It actually happened. And I think that's human. What keeps disturbing me about the situation we're in right now is it seems like we are so depraved. You're wondering where that bottom line is. When are people going to pinch themselves and say, oh my God, like the alcoholic? I have a friend who stopped drinking. He said, one morning I woke up and I had blood all over my hands and I had no idea what I had done. And I said, I have to stop. Well, where is that moment of recognition where people here say, what have we become? Torturing children, killing children, selling children. Once you do that, it's the end. So that has to be stopped.
Yeah. So what you're talking about is a collective movement of people having this form of consciousness that's going to wake up and saying, wow, we've allowed this stuff to go too far. We need to stop it. How do we obtain that? I mean, obviously you're running for government and you know your history pretty well. And we always talk about, the leaders of the past and how they were able to, rally the troops of sorts, Americans to bring out the best in us, right? I mean, we're so divided as a nation right now. And the social engineers, those who understand, who are kind of pitting us against each other. They know us very well, and it seems like they're doing a very good job at it. I mean, we see a lot of people simply just looking at Israel as a third rail because the guy they want to support, Donald Trump, right, is, bought off by Miriam Adelson for $100 million in the campaign. How do we make that happen? How do you envision that?
Well,
I mean, you're running for Senate, so this is a good question for you.
Right.
So.
We have to get people to speak up, first of all. And I can tell you something that I found of interest. Jose Vega, as you may know, had this intervention against Paul Krugman in New York City a couple of days ago, where he challenged him, saying, "You say the economy's great. Well, how do you think it is for people in the South Bronx and the people in North Carolina? And maybe North Carolina should change its name to Israel or Ukraine." And this thing went totally viral, including being picked up by some of Trump's, like Prosobiec, who is a nasty character and who wouldn't say who Jose actually was, but they're getting this, America first, blah, blah, blah. So Jose went to the rally today with Trump and Elon Musk and had written a leaflet about the destruction of North Carolina and the wars and how much money we're spending on war. And people would say, and what happened was people would say, "Well, are you endorsing Trump?" And he said, "No." And they said, "Well, why are you here?" He said, "I'm an American citizen. We have this disaster. And Trump is saying we should have this bombing of Iran." And he said many, many people totally disagreed with that, totally disagreed with it. But they're not speaking out, right? And that's part of the problem, because Trump, if you go on his Twitter feed, I went there today because I wanted to see his horrible comments about Iran. And he has all these polls. Should we throw out all the migrants? Should we blah, blah, blah? They're stupid, but he also is kind of interested in knowing what people are thinking. And people then have to say it and not be cowed by the crazy dynamic that is created, where everyone thinks, "Oh, well, if you're with Trump, then you have to support genocide. Or if you're with Kamala, then no, you don't have to. And you have to tell the truth." The other thing I wanted to say is, of course, this is why we are doing this event October 26th in New York with classical music, because we have to reach people's conscience. People are behaving in such an ugly way, and then they're so degraded and horrible. And you could say, well, why should we save mankind? I mean, they're behaving in a despicable fashion. Well, maybe mankind's just going to die. Maybe it's just you're a giant meteor. Maybe that's the best solution. And I keep saying, no, we have to remind ourselves that humanity is beautiful, that the human mind is beautiful. And I think about the people in Palestine. Early on in this, I got word I had gone to a vigil in Westchester County and then got on their email list. And I learned that one of the participants in that particular peace rally was a violin teacher. And she had a student in Gaza, a 14-year-old girl who was brilliant, a virtuoso violinist, who was killed in the bombing. And I think it's these things where you put a face, or you put a potential of what the person was, what they might have perhaps given to humanity had she been allowed to develop that talent, that we can find the conscience of enough people that they will act differently.
In closing, since you're running in New York, I think that it's very first off, why do you feel it's important? When I said the other day you have this journalist gene, why do you think it's so important that you find the truth on the issues that are so much discussed nowadays? I mean, when you look at the foreign policy discussions right now, it's all about Ukraine, Russia, and Israel, Gaza, right? It's as if nothing else is going on. I don't think people even know that the government changed in Bangladesh. I don't even believe they understand. There were some elections. I mean, obviously, everybody knew about the elections in Venezuela. Elon Musk, he couldn't find Venezuela on the map one day, and then the next thing you know, he wouldn't stop with Nicolas Maduro. For me, that's showing your true colors. But aside from that foreign policy aspect that's talked about a lot, inflation's talked about, but the border, immigration, migrants, it's so much talked about. It consumes the majority of Fox News and conservative media out there. You live in New York. Now we're hearing this rhetoric, and if you basically just take the time and go look at the numbers, you'll see it's false. The narrative that FEMA's out of money to help with the hurricane victims because they depleted their funds on illegal immigration. And I think immigrants maybe use 5% of their budget. Nobody wants to talk about the fact that we're sending all this money to Ukraine and Israel. But can you give us a little context of what's going on when people say all these immigrants get a handout and, they get the latest cell phone and tickets to movies free every Friday night and an Amex Visa loaded up for them and a cruise at the end of the year? You know what I mean, right? So
Yeah, of course
please.
I know. Look, we're all in the same boat. You have a dying, rotten financial bubble. And the way they see us is we're all little conduits of money and money laundering. So, first of all, we have had a policy of overthrowing governments, putting sanctions on countries, making places unlivable, like what the Clintons did to Haiti, for example. And it's my idea that you break it, you own it. We destroy a country, we have no right to say that people can't come here because we made that mess. There are also trafficking cartels. I talked to some people who came here from Mauritania. I went down to the Roosevelt Hotel and to see what was going on, why Adams was making everyone sleep on the street. And everyone there was from West Africa. So thank God I had a couple years of French in high school and I could ask, why did you come here? What happened? And he said, people came to Mauritania. I mean, think about it. Mauritania, they had an airplane. Who has an airplane? And they told us Biden has opened the border. And for $5,000, you can get on a plane and we will fly you to Nicaragua. Then you can risk life and limb on a bus to come here and sleep on a sidewalk. So this guy who, and I was trying to explain, but it was sort of beyond my language, but I kept saying, don't you think it would be better if your nation were really allowed to become prosperous and developed than coming here and being in this condition? And he just wanted the opportunity. But imagine if Mauritania were developing. This 20-something-year-old fellow is clearly very enterprising, very dedicated, very tough. He would be an invaluable part of the development of his nation. And instead, he's here being used for what? To launder money, to get a bailout for the hotels. They cram zillions of people in these hotel rooms and they give them stale food that makes them sick, sort of like the way that Nancy.
Could you repeat that again? Repeat that what they do, because you faded in and out. You went in and out. What do they do at the hotels?
They give them old food that causes food poisoning. That's what's happening. And then they have these no-bid contracts like this thing called DocGo or Doc.Go or something or other, which got millions of dollars supposedly to deliver health care, and they're not even experienced in it. And that's been a complete disaster. And now they're trying to get a federal contract. And my own hypothesis, I haven't done enough work, but if you look at what's being paid, bus tickets for people to come here reportedly are $1,400. Why is that? It doesn't cost that, right? The hotels, what are they paying the hotels? When you and I go to a hotel, I imagine if you go there and you look at the room rate, the price on the door, it's always like triple whatever you're actually paying, right? They give you this discount and that discount, and they say it's $300, but you pay $89.
Yeah.
They're paying the hotels $500 a night to cram.
Are they putting multiple people in each rooms too? Is that true as well?
Absolutely. Entire families and that kind of thing. And then they're feeding them crappy old stale food. And then a friend of mine up in Niagara County told me they went to interview people and the migrants told them, we aren't allowed to talk to you. We are not allowed. They're being treated like prisoners. Right. And then we have the story, I think 320,000 children are missing. So they're clearly being trafficked all over the place.
So you're also saying what I'm hearing too as well is that there is some truth to the fact that it was when I was talking with Thomas Massey. He's like, oh, they're coming here because Biden told them to come here. There it seems to be, whether it be the UN or these other NGOs, throwing a lot of fuel on the fire but it's a situation where their countries are undeveloped in the first place because we're stealing resources, or we have military bases, or we're keeping it destabilized because we want those resources for pennies on the dollar. 100 bases in Latin America. It's a little bit of column A and column B. Why would they be doing something like that? Why would they exacerbate the problem? Is it just a money laundering scheme that you're talking about, or is there a different long-term goal?
Well, I will tell you my dark theory.
Okay.
I think they want us to start killing each other. And I think they are trying to make people be so enraged at the migrants that eventually we get into violent clashes. And I'll tell you, one of the reasons I really started becoming convinced that this was the case, they had a situation where 5 of them beat up a couple of cops. That's what we saw. Then you saw the whole video and you see the cops go in and push people and slam them against the wall. And, anyway, the 5 people who beat up the cops get taken to jail. We have this no bail system, and that's a whole other conversation we should have, because obviously punishment is a stupid way. But anyway, so they don't even stay in prison. They're released right away. And the media is all there when they're released. And then as they're getting released, they're all giving the middle finger to the press. And I'm thinking, how is it that we see these guys beating up the police? They go to prison, they come out and they give everyone the middle finger, and the media is there to film it. Is this not just designed to get everybody enraged and ready to kill these people? And so I think it is. And I think, frankly, the American people were actually better than they thought. People are not beating up migrants generally or harming, people are upset. They're seeing their neighborhoods just, destroyed. They're seeing the schools completely overwhelmed. They're seeing that we have a system which already physically was decrepit and couldn't handle the population we have, now being overflowing. And therefore, I think the way this has all been handled was completely deliberately worse than incompetent. But and the irony is, really, we should be allying with the migrants against the billionaire people who are doing this to all of us. Because when you park in a meter in New York for 2 hours, it's $15. Who ever heard of that? That's more than you know what I'm saying? We're all being looted. And then it's like the people who go pay homeless people to fight each other and make films out of it. It's disgusting.
I hate those videos. I start to lose hope when I see Americans do that to each other, right? You know what I'm saying? But when I see the other videos, Diane, of those guys who are out there who find a way to pay for groceries for somebody, or give money back, or go to a gas station, or I'm going to bless you today and give you $1,000 to go do those things, it does give me hope. And I think there's a lot of great people in this country with a lot of great spirit. Diane Sare, thank you so much for joining us today. We look forward to talking to you again soon.
Thank you.